All right, well, hi everyone. We're so happy that you're here again with us today. It's another Monday, it's another new day, so thank you for joining our ICC Crisis Connect. I'm going to open us today and get us started. My name is Diane Lonsdale. Some of you may have been with us for some of the presentations that I've given, and Palmer opens, and today I'm going to kind of start us off, and then Palmer's going to do most of the talking and teaching today about our topic, PR Proverbs, which is so relevant in today's climate. So thank you for being here. If we have some slides, we can go through the agenda. Do you have your slides, Palmer? There we go. Okay. So moving right along to the next slide. There we go. So what we'll be going through today is I'll open us with a welcome. Oh, I just welcomed us, so prayer. Introduce Palmer, who probably needs no introduction, but I have a few things to tell you about him. The purpose of our network, and just going through our presentation topic for today, our Proverbs Media Relations Essentials, and then we'll wrap up as we always do with the Q&A. So with that, why don't I just go ahead and open us in a word of prayer. Lord, first of all, Father, we thank you for a new day. We're grateful for your mercies. We're grateful to be here all together today on this Monday. Lord, we recognize that you are sovereign over this world, that you are in control of our universe and of our world and of the COVID crisis and of our nation and our ministries and the people we reach out to. And Lord, we're not in control of any of that. So we're so happy that you're here with us today. We lift up all of those issues to you, God, for your care and protection. Lord, we thank you for our teams. I thank you for the Crisis Connect and this regular team of attenders that have been with us now for these 7 or 8 weeks that we've been together, popping in as they can. We're so happy that we can all be here and collaborate. So Lord, we just ask your blessing on this time. We lift the time up to you, and we pray that everything that comes out of our mouths and our time together would be honoring and glorifying to you. It's in your name we pray, Lord. Amen. Okay. So the purpose of the Crisis Connect, if you've been with us for a while, you know we've been kind of going on together for the last 7 or 8 weeks on various topics of interest as we all work together as one big community of communicators and within our specific ministries to communicate in the most relevant and impactful ways so we really can be there for the constituents and the stakeholders that we serve. And we've learned a lot from each other, and we're getting to know some of you a little bit better as well through the process. So we're grateful for that. As always, we'd like to say that we're here to follow up with any of you on an individual basis. We have different options, starting with a free consultation call to just discuss whatever you might want us to weigh in on, and various other options that would be available. So I just do that as an opening. Now to move on to Palmer, here's a nice picture of him without his baseball cap. But so Palmer is our CEO and founder of In Christ Communications, and he's a former newspaper journalist and editor. He's worked for big Fortune 100 companies in the media world, has a huge list of credentials. What you might not know is that he started ICC in 2002, 18 years ago, because God had laid on his heart, as he has on some of the rest of the team members here, to go out and serve God's kingdom with the equipping and the skills that he's built into Palmer through all these years. So that's what he's been doing for 18 years, and we're all blessed for it. And I hope that you will all learn some great insights from his talk on PR Proverbs today. So with that, I think I will turn it over to you, Palmer, and let you take it away.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. So what we'd like to do today is go through this is a resource we have on our website, and you can download it, but that you probably ought to wait till this webinar is done and I've added to it. So this will be sort of the definitive presentation. But several years ago, I wrote an article for the Christian Leadership Alliance about media relations. And, I had a limited amount of words I could use and had to make it really strong and tight and succinct, and thought about, Solomon and his Proverbs, how there's these short, pithy truths. And it turned out to be a really good format to use. And so I called it PR Proverbs, Media Essentials. So this is basically a presentation based around that article that CLA carried a couple of years ago. So let me share my screen. I'll go ahead and get started. Let's see here. So what, a lot of people think media relations has seen its best day, that's given way to digital and social and all kinds of other, online communications practices. But the truth is, it's still foundational and fundamental to an integrated communication strategy. And actually, it's sort of the cornerstone, because if you do media relations right, everything else is easier. Social media falls right in line with it. Digital falls right in line with it. Donor development communications falls in line with it. So it's still important. It's called earned media because you don't buy it, you go out there and you earn it. And it's, you deal with all kinds of news media, whether it's Christian or secular or whatever beats, you're trying to reach. But the whole idea is to, number one, increase awareness of your brand. If nothing else, people, when they hear your name, they've heard it before because they either saw it, heard it, read about it, experienced it one way or the other. And then the second thing media relations can do, in addition to creating brand awareness, is create brand favorability. That people, there's some credibility to your brand. There's a character to it. So when you get around to making an ask of some sort, whether it's through online, the website, social media, digital, direct mail, they're favorably disposed towards you, and you're much more likely to get a yes. So increase awareness, increase credibility. It's a very crowded media marketplace right now. I forget the numbers about how many messages people get a day and go through. It's crazy. It's really like drinking from a fire hose. And so it's really important in this cluttered marketplace to have a clear, distinct message and news value with the news media. And it's not a given that just because you do things that are important to you or the kingdom that it's important to them. So it's really important to step out and stand out in the marketplace. And when it's done effectively, it can really advance an organization's mission. The messaging and the mission can be advanced in a great way. And if you do it right, it's fairly economical. So I'm breaking this is broken down into two parts. One is called Know Your Ministry. The second part, macro part, is called Know Your Media. So I'm going to go through some quick, proverb type truths about knowing your ministry. This sort of the foundation for, healthy, successful media relations. If you don't know your ministry, it doesn't matter if you know the media, because you don't know who you are or what you're going to say. So you really need to go to school on your organization and do your homework and really epitomize what your ministry is all about. So, I say you don't want to become or have people that work for you that are simply what the Bible calls hirelings. There's somebody you hire to do something and you pay them and they do what you tell them to do, but when the wolf comes or things get tight, they disappear. So you want to sort of have a shepherd mentality. You really need to be bought in to your organization and share its DNA. When we work with our clients, it's really important for us to do this ourselves, because I want to be grafted in. I want to understand the organization so much so that when we talk about strategy, I'm thinking ahead of them. So it's really important that you take buy-in, you personify, what your ministry is all about. Um, you need to know where your ministry falls in sort of the spectrum of interest from the news media. Typically our clients, the Christian media is interested in them. The secular media that covers the religion beat or the faith and values beat is interested in them. Maybe the nonprofit, world to some degree. Sometimes there's trade press you might want to get, and then there's the local and community news beats. But think also about where your ministry might fit in a different kind of niche or a different kind of beat. For instance, we've done work over the years for Mission Aviation Fellowship. Well, in addition to the Christian faith and values, nonprofit, local beats, the aviation beat is interested in MAF. They tend to attract a lot of people that have technical helps backgrounds. So engineers, IT people gravitate toward them. So these are beats. Think about your ministry and what you do that the world might look at you, for news from, in addition to the sort of the given ones about the Christian and the faith-based and the local beats. It's really important that your organization have a healthy, proactive relationship with the media. I've worked for two major corporations in my life. One of them was very open and transparent, in a healthy way. The other one was very parsimonious, very guarded, very hidden. It's like having a hostile witness on a witness stand when they talk to the media. And so a lot of people are fearful of dealing with the news media, but and leadership's different. A lot of people don't understand the media and they're scared because of that. But it's really important that you have a healthy, proactive relationship, because if you do it right, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be fine. You can't, but to be on guard and fearful, with the news media, it's not going to, it's going to hurt, not going to help you. It could even hurt you. So in terms of continuing on with knowing your ministry, I have it pointed here, develop story sources within your organization. You're going to need good content to interest the news media. So it's in your best interest to find and cultivate good internal sources in your organization that can keep you apprised of what's going on, especially when times of crisis come. If you don't already have a good relationship with certain people in your organization, it's going to be hard to form one. So we really encourage you to cultivate proactively your sources, because they're your it's like in America, the food supply chain, they're your supply chain, and if it's not coming from them, you're not going to have anything to work with. In terms of designated spokespersons, you need 2 primary spokespersons, and typically it is not your CEO. We recommend that it be a COO or someone high up in the organization that knows, has a broad view and understanding of the organization to be the primary spokesperson. And the reason we do this is because if something goes wrong, the CEO can always come in later on and sort of straighten things out, come in on a white horse if he has to, so that's why we recommend, and the CEO needs to be perceived as running the organization. So, ideally, and sometimes we default and we have to do the CEO, but we recommend it be the second in charge, because, it needs to look like the CEO is still running the organization and not get tied up in communications too much. So, you want to cultivate, you have a second person in the organization that's basically a media relations handler. This is somebody who interfaces with the news media, takes their calls, gets them information, gets them resources, arranges interviews. They do sort of the housekeeping side of media relations, and sometimes they can be spokespersons too. So you have a primary spokesperson, you have a media relations coordinator, and if you have those 2 things, you'll be in pretty good shape. It's really important that if you're a professional communicator, that you have direct access to whoever is the head of your ministry or organization, whether it's the president or the CEO or the chairman of the board. You don't want somebody between you and them because even on the best days, things get lost in translation. And it's really important that you have a personal relationship with your decision maker, who personifies the ministry, so you can get firsthand understanding of what's important, and get the information and get the mind of the leader. I mean, sometimes there's a gap between the guy at the top or the gal at the top and other people underneath them. So get to know your CEO if you can. This is basically this slide talks about putting together a communications, a media relations team. Consists of a good news writer, a good social media coordinator, a good graphic designer, and a webmaster. And it's really important that you create a media or a press page on your website where you can have, especially a press kit, where the media can just go there and download bios, photos, FAQs, white papers, have access to photographic archives, photo archives, video archives, important links. So we really encourage people to have a media or press page on their website. But and going back to a news writer, you need somebody who knows how to write press releases, feature stories, and opinion pieces like the media writes them themselves. If you make the journalists work too much, they're not gonna help you. But if you have somebody who knows how to understands the care and feeding of the news media and knows what a well-written press release is like and how it's written, that goes a long way towards getting you picked up and earning their respect. So when we advise, newspaper people usually make the best news writers. They're used to deadlines. They write strong, tight copy according to Associated Press guidelines. They know what the journalist is looking for. So try to find somebody. If you don't have somebody in house, you can always look out and try to find a freelancer, but gravitate towards a real news writer if you can. It's important, again, to have a good photographer or videographer, either on your team or as a freelancer. You want to maintain a good stock photo archive and good B-roll video that illustrates your media, your ministry. It's important that you get the right kind of social media coordinator. These days it's kind of like throw a rock, hit a social media expert, because a lot of people think it's the technology. It's a technology that that a lot of younger people understand easily. They're digital natives, but that doesn't, just because they know how to work the technology doesn't mean they have a public relations orientation. What social media really is essentially is community relations on a virtual level. So you want somebody who understands PR and not just someone who understands the technology but doesn't have a feel for the messaging or the stakeholders, because it's important that there's a conversation going on that's cultivated. And if something's in a crisis, you need the right person there to be able to discern what's going on and how to possibly respond. Of course, it's always good to have a good graphic designer, because you're going to need one along the way. And then typically, sometimes that's also the webmaster. So these are all good. These are all the positions that, if I was putting together a sort of a basic media relations team, these are the folks I'd have on my team. It's really important that whatever kind of coverage you get clips to be able to show what you've done, to be able to get the links to those stories. You can go and Google news alerts and set up alerts with keywords, and get notified when when you get a media hit. We subscribe to a service called Cision. It's it's probably the largest online media contact database in the world, but it gives us access to put together distribution lists, but also allows us to do clip monitoring. So we can run a search and find all the stories that have been picked up in the media, whether it's television, newspapers, radio is a little hard. Sometimes they'll put a story on their website, and we can pick that up too. Um, but it's really important that you monitor the media as well. And there's something called equivalent ad value. And when you get asked the hard question of, Palmer, we doing all this media relations work. What's the return on investment for us and justifying your budget? One of the ways we do that is Decision has this aspect to it, is we can determine what's called equivalent ad value. So if you were to take a story and measure it in column inches, if it was print or online, or a radio interview or a television piece, how many minutes that ran, we have a database we can bash that against and come away with. If you had to buy that ad space, if you had to buy that ad time, what would it cost you? And so that's one way to prove the value. I think I've said that during the SIM Ebola crisis, we got 30,000 positive media hits with the equivalent ad value of $300 million over a 4-month period. And really, the truth is, if you take that ad value, you really need to sort of multiply it by 2 or 3 times, because having a credible third party say something about you rather than you say something about yourself in an ad is worth much more than the ad itself. So that third party credibility is very important. Of course, it's really important to develop a crisis communications a team and plan ahead of time. It's, you don't want to try to figure it out when the bullets are flying by your head and there's a news crew in the parking lot, wanting to, talk to your CEO. So really important to have a crisis communications plan in place, if you can, because it'll serve you well in the long run. We encourage folks to, even if they have all their own in-house PR capability, they at least establish a relationship with an outside agency, just in case you end up needing them. We do that for a lot of people. We're just sort of in their Rolodex, and they may never call us, but we know we've come to know each other enough to where if we had to work together, we wouldn't be starting from scratch. So, whether you do that locally or talk to us or somebody like us, I encourage you to go ahead and, it's like having an attorney that you have a relationship with ahead of time. Most big companies, they have in-house counsel, but they have firms that they use to do a lot of their work. And so you need to have those relationships in place ahead of time. So let me move on to know your media. I'm trying to look at my time here real quick. Hang on a second, see where I am. Okay, we're in good shape. So now it's about know your media. So we subscribe to what I call the Acts 1:8 marketing philosophy. Jesus said, "You'll be my disciples in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth." So if you apply this to media relations, it's really important that you take care of your local media first, because you've got to live with them day in, day out, for a long time, forever. But then start thinking about what's the next level of news media that you want to take into consideration. You maybe a regional media. I mean, I'm in North Carolina. Something happens in North Carolina, sometimes people in South Carolina care, or Virginia care, or Tennessee care, or the Southeast cares. So you need to look at sort of the next level. And then Samaria is a little bit further out. That might be, let's say, Jerusalem is also your Christian media. That's the bullseye for you if you're thinking in terms of national media. Whereas Judea might be the secular media that covers religion beat. A lot of them, they may cover you if they find you relevant, but we find that a lot of secular media that covers religion beat is really sort of down on Christians, and we're sort of the last dog at the bowl that they care about, when it used to be the other way around. So think about the kinds of media, and then the uttermost is kind of like out there media that you might cultivate if you have a really strong story like the Ebola crisis, where media from all over the world comes to you. So think about concentric circles when you think about media relations, but take care of Jerusalem first, whether that's your local media or the Christian media on a national level. That's your Jerusalem. Care and feeding the media. You need to know what the media want and they need, and then you need to deliver it. It's a voracious beast. It's 24/7. They gobble up content, and the truth is, they have diminished staffs. They have budgets, smaller budgets, and they're more likely to use your stuff if it's good than ever. So, just learn, what they want and how they want it and when they want it, and serve up quality. It's like food. You serve up quality food, they're going to take it and they're going to come back for more. Just remember also that the competition among the media is very, very fierce, especially in a local market, or even especially on a national level. During the Ebola crisis, these networks would kill each other to try to get an up on the competition, and it all started with the morning shows. It was Good Morning America, versus all the other morning shows, because that's where the advertising revenues start, is with the good, the Today Show. But they will do anything to try to get an upper hand. So just realize that they're competing against each other, and deal with them in an even-handed way, because you don't want to try to play favorites. I mean, you may give an exclusive at certain times to certain people, but in general, you want to treat them all the same, because they're speaking to different audiences, and you're going to need them all at some point. So if there's a good chance that they'll use your news if it's a good story that's written in a professional manner, and gets into the right hands. But don't expect the news media to be grateful to you. They're busy people. They're task oriented. They're in a hurry. They're overworked. They're underpaid, and they don't like taking handouts from what I call PR flacks, because they're proud. They've got this sort of a double-mindedness. They've got these high ideals about who they really are, but they take handouts all along the way from people like us, which we're not bad people, we're good people, but in their minds, they don't want to be accused of being hand-fed by a PR machine. So if they're not effusive in their gratitude, don't worry about it. It's just who they are. The tell of the tape will be, do they use your stuff, and do they do stuff with you again? If those things happen, then you're doing something right, even if they don't say a thing. It's really important not to waste the media's time. They do more stories in a day now than they ever did, probably 4 or 5 or 6. It's just crazy what they have to do. When the media calls, call them right, but take the call. And if you need to get back to them immediately. The news cycle does not wait for you. And so it's really important, especially in a crisis situation, that you hit these windows, these media cycle windows at the right time. And they want it yesterday. And so while getting it right is important, getting it soon is right underneath that. So don't mess around. I mean, sometimes an inquiry has a longer fuse on it, but if it's breaking news, they're on deadlines. Find out when their deadline is, and get back to them, because they live by the nanosecond. And if you can help get them what they need when they need it, you've done half your job. Don't call late in the afternoon to a television station or a newspaper. It's when they're on their stories, they're putting them together, getting ready to have newscasts and run the paper. So just try to avoid times when they're tied up and they can't really talk. Now, if they call you and they want to talk to you, do it. But just remember that there's a time where they're trying to get a product put together for dissemination, and they don't want to be disturbed. Just, I've covered this before on maybe some other calls, but there are three main news categories out there that we typically use. One is a hard news press release. Another is a feature story idea. The third one is an opinion piece. So hard news is a time, date sensitive, straightforward uh, press release written in an inverted pyramid style. It's basically, today, say there's a plane crash somewhere. Today, Egyptian Airlines plane crashed in Cyprus, blah, blah, blah. That's a hard news, straightforward press release. It's written in inverted pyramid style, which is you take a pyramid and you turn it upside down. It's got the most important information at the very top, you know, trailing down and narrowing down to the least important information. The reason this is because historically in newspapers, when they're trying to cut and paste and put a paper together, they had so much space to use, and if they ran out of space, they just cut the story from the bottom up. So you didn't lose any context by doing that. It was just one sort of a descending hierarchy of important points that you could cut at any point and still not lose the reader. Feature stories, generally these are not hard news necessarily, but they're interesting stories, important stories. Could be a profile on somebody. It could be a trend story. It could be a human interest story. And what the feature stories do is they give the reader a break from the hard news. Basically, a little bit of lightness or ease, different kind of writing style. It's more closer toward a magazine than a newspaper. But what we do typically is feature stories are very personal. They always have a byline with them. And if you put out a feature story and send it to a lot of people, they won't use it because they're very singular, they're very personal, and so and they don't want to run a feature story typically if somebody else is running it already. So what we do is we put together a feature story pitch letter that's got like 3 or 4 or 5 different feature story ideas together, and we send that to the journalist, and then we follow up with them to see if they might be interested in doing a story from this sort of menu of feature story ideas that we've got. And if it's a big enough outlet and they really want it, we'll turn around and write it for them. If we were pitching Christianity Today on something and they liked some of the ideas that we had, but they didn't have the bandwidth to do it themselves, and we volunteered to do it ourselves, or hire a freelancer to do it, that could be a good score. So feature stories are best served up in a pitch letter and then followed up with a phone call and emails. Opinion pieces, these are sort of like, I guess, editorials or blogs. A lot of times, it's just a place where it's just a niche in a communications organization where you can get some publicity around a topic as a thought leader. A lot of times subjects are a little bit complicated or fuzzy, or there's no real hard news to hang it on. An opinion piece, like an editorial, is a good way to get your ministry message out there, get you branded, and showcase someone in your organization, whether it's your president or CEO or important subject matter experts. We get a lot of mileage out of opinion pieces when hard news is hard to come by. So in terms of writing a press release, you want to write strong, tight, muscled up copy. Best way to learn how to do this is go read stories that are written by the Associated Press. The very lean, very basic, inverted pyramid. So being wordy, less is usually more in a press release. And fluff, they hate fluff because they got to go in there. It's like, liposuction. They got to go in there and get the fat out if you write a puffed up press release. So you don't want that to happen. So, try to write things very directly and very succinctly. And you can't say everything in a press release. You say the basics, and if they want to know more, they'll call you. or you can follow with a pitch call and tell them more. When you think about the news, think in terms of pictures and photographs and videos. For the television folks, if you can't show it on television, it almost doesn't exist. I mean, you can do an anchor read on a news story, but you got to have something to show in the background, at least a logo or some sort of a B-roll video or voiceover, something they can do a voiceover on. But think in terms of pictures when you're thinking about trying to generate publicity. It's really important that you can have a great story and a well-written press release aimed at the right person, but if you can't get to them with a good media contact database, you've built a bridge 90% of the way to the other side, and you're still not going to get there. So it's real important to have a good current media list. We subscribe again to Cision. We can get to any journalist at any outlet at any place in the country, all complete contact information. I think it costs us like $10,000 or $15,000 a year just to subscribe to it, but we can't really do what we do without it. So if you want to talk to us about that, you're happy to do that, but you can develop your own media contact database for your market if you want to. It'll be a lot of smiling and dialing, but you can put together your list, and you need to keep it current. Another way, and so you can distribute it to them at the right time and have that list there at the ready. You want to e-blast your press release to your lists. If you think about if you try to get some national coverage, we use a service called Christian Newswire, where we typically put most of, if not all of our releases on there, because most of our stuff has to do with on a national or international level. There's a second service called Religion News Service. This service goes to secular media that cover the religion beat, say, the religion reporter at the Washington Post or the New York Times or CBS News. So if you've got a story that might have a broader appeal than just to the evangelical world, think about Religion News Service. And if it has great appeal, there's another service called PR Newswire. It's pretty expensive to put a release out through that. That goes to all the newspapers and gets picked up, by everyone. Just quickly, just to sort of wrap up here, it's really important that the people, your spokespersons, have had some media training. We do adversarial media training that ends up being, starts off friendly and ends up being hard questions under hot lights. And then think about, somebody's got a big interview coming up with, a big media outlet, and it's a sensitive subject. Before they, get on that interview, come up with some anticipated questions you think you might get from the media. Go through a Q&A with your subject matter expert, your spokesperson, and have a coach them up, because it's that practice can really help in advance of an important interview. We typically follow up with pitch calls and emails. We find out that even though we distribute to a lot of people, not everybody gets it on the first pass. So we turn around, once we send it out, we do a report, figured out, see what the open rates are, who opened it, who clicked on the links. So the people that open it, that are important to us, we go back to them right away if we haven't heard from them, and pitch them personally. You wouldn't believe how many times they'll tell us that, oh, I didn't see that, or I saw it but I didn't get back to it. Thank you for contacting me. And typically we send a follow-up email, personal pitch email on it first, and then follow up with a phone call. So that's a good way to get people to, squeaky wheel gets the grease. So we have a lot of success when we follow up with it. We don't call everybody, we call the ones that are most important to us. And even with the media that does not open the email, if they're important enough to us, we'll either send it to them again, or we'll call them and direct their attention to it, because they're important and we'd like to have them. Interview arrangements, it's just, you need to work with their schedules where possible, especially if they're on a deadline, and get all the particulars. We have a form that we use to do intake on interviews so that we can, find out what we need to get from, excuse me, the journalists, and then turn around and hand that to the client and say, here's what this interview is all about. Again, I've talked about before, afterwards, run a clip search, either through Google News Alerts or somebody like Cision. Get your equivalent ad value if you have a service that has that kind of aspect to it, because at the end of the day, that's how one of the ways that you show your value. So the last thing I was going to leave you with is just, this is something I came to, and I mentioned, I think, on the call with Bruce Johnson from SIM and Ebola crisis. If you have a servant heart toward the news media, that'll serve you better than anything you can do professionally, or it's just the way to go about doing it. Because if you serve them and try to help them for all the right reasons, the right ways, you're going to get their best shot. You're going to get a good story 9 times out of 10. They're going to come back to you. But think about serving them and helping them do their job, because they've got a tough job. If you take this attitude, it'll go a long way towards making everything right and smooth. So, Diane, I think that's it. We're let me stop this share real quick. Happy to take some questions.
Yeah, we have some questions here. Thank you for that, Palmer. I hope you all enjoyed that. The first question here is, why should development goals drive most public relations?
Why should development goals? Well, here's the way I look at it. And this is something I've come to later in my career. If this can sound wrong, but it's really right. If what you're doing doesn't make the cash register ring, what are you doing? So, and I only say that not because ministry is not important, it's paramount. But if the organization doesn't get funded, you can't do anything. So in development is sort of the engine that pulls the train. So it's really important to, in a sanctified way, because it's all God's work. And so, but if you line up with the goals of the organization and what they're trying to do in terms of fundraising, you'll go, 90% of the way of getting it right and doing it, because it's the most important things you're doing anyway. Otherwise, you wouldn't be trying to fund them. So line up behind development. Get on the same page with your development director, and sync up with that messaging throughout an integrated strategy, whether it's social, digital, web, direct mail, because, at the end of the day, those guys and gals have their finger on the pulse of what it takes, what the ministry wants to do, and what it takes to do it with financially. So you can't go wrong by hooking your wagon to that.
Good. Thank you for that. Here's another one. Give me a good example of an integrated communications strategy that works well using media relations.
Again, the integrated strategy starts from, branding to marketing to advertising to media relations, social, digital, web, special events, that whole integrated spectrum. Media relations is in there. Let's see what you want, and if you drill down and took the media relations section of that, ideally what you want is media coverage across the communication spectrum, media spectrum. So in a perfect world, if you had a great story, it might show up on CBN News television. It might be picked up by SRN News, national radio, or AFR, or what is it, USA, Radio USA. Your guest might be your spokesperson might be a guest on a national or major market talk show. It shows up in the Christian Post online. It's on your website. It's in your social media. It's in some of your digital communications. And by the time your direct mail piece gets to the house, they've heard about you one way or another, maybe a time or 2 or 3, and we get what we call this horizontal frequency exposure over several different communications channels in the same time period. So from a media relations aspect, you want to try to get a spectrum of pickup across a variety of media channels. And so it all adds up with the other integrated communications pieces to where, you have brand awareness, you have favorable disposition, and you'll get the decisions. Your website and will help you get the decisions you're trying to get from the people, your stakeholders.
Okay. Here's another one. How do I diffuse an aggressive or hostile reporter, especially a TV reporter?
Well, number one, you'd have to know going in who you're dealing with and anticipate that could happen. Sometimes you get, ambushed, but that whole gotcha stuff doesn't happen as often in real life as it does on television. But so, forewarned is forearmed. That coaching is really important. That you get the hard questions and you don't stop till you get it right in practice, and then then you go on. Then you can go do the interview. But number one, you just have to keep your cool. Number two, it's not personal. Number three, media people tend to be a little bit shallow, not because they're shallow people, because they don't have time to go deep. But the thing to do is, if you get a hard question like that, have a ready answer. And if you need a little bit more time to think about it, sort of say that's a good question, or, let me repeat that back to you, give you a little bit of time to sort of collect your thoughts, and then, give them the answer that you want, not the answer that they're necessarily looking for. You can pivot, you can shift to something else. You don't even have to answer it. You can, it's amazing when I watch these interviews on television at night. I'm a sort of a news junkie. When these guys ask direct questions, I was watching Chris Wallace the other day, Mike Pence never answers a question. He's a machine. He says he's got his messaging and he doesn't deviate. And you can go through all these interviews and they never answer what the reporter's asking, and nobody blinks. So that's the way I'd handle it.
I think a few weeks ago, Marcy covered some of those strategies like bridging and blocking and highlighting, right, and all of those things. So
right.
That's good. That's helpful. Okay, how about this one? Let me see. Who makes the best spokesperson?
Again, I think I touched on this earlier. Ideally, it'd be somebody like your COO or executive vice president, somebody high up in the organization who's got a good view of everything, got good experience, not the CEO. We still might need the white knight coming in. Somebody who is a good communicator, is patient, is pretty much unflappable and calm, and doesn't have thin skin, because you can these guys, if it turns ugly, they can really go after you. It's like blood in the water with sharks. But yeah, and again, just because somebody's a good communicator doesn't mean they don't need media training. A lot of good preachers, you put them on television in a news interview, they don't have, the format is so different, they don't know what to do. And so we really advise media training for spokespeople.
Here's a question that is
let me tell you one more thing. You do want to also have some subject matter experts lined up. Not just, this is all about the head of the organization. You want people who are closest to knowing the subject matter and are capable of communicating that. The closer you can get to them, the better. I mean, I'd rather, if I've got something going on, say there's this Ebola crisis in Africa, and it's versus, a CEO being on camera versus a doctor who's over there, up to his neck in it all. I want to talk to the doctor. So think about subject matter experts too as being spokespersons. Again, you need to coach them up. They need to be, ready for prime time, but that's what, that's their consideration in addition to a standard spokesperson.
Okay. This one is kind of a related question. It says, what do I do if my leadership is afraid of or paranoid about the media?
Well, it's a hard thing to dislodge that notion. Um, Again, people, we have one major ministry we work with a lot that don't that historically they haven't talked to the news media because number one, they're afraid of unintended consequences, afraid of being embarrassed, but usually they don't have people in place that know how to handle the media, and so there's a sort of a fear that of talking to them, that they don't want to risk that because out there on a television interview there's no net, and so it's really important that, but they understand that you need to understand that if you don't frame that narrative, somebody else is going to, and if you don't talk, they're going to fill in the blanks with what they think. So again, if quality media relations done right 95% of the time, not only does it, you're not going to do anything wrong, you're going to do so much right. And sometimes even bad publicity is publicity. A lot of people think, but I'm not sure about that. But it's important that you have a healthy attitude toward the media, because it's earned media is some of the cheapest publicity you can buy.
Okay, good. Here's one that takes a slight digital turn,
Okay.
I think, in the conversation. What are the traits of a good social media coordinator?
Again, I think I may have mentioned this earlier. You want somebody who's not just somebody who understands the technology and tracking the trends and all the metrics that come out of social media. You need somebody who has an understanding, has a PR orientation along the lines of a community relations person that has a feel for people. I mean, it's totally technical. It's sort of an oxymoron. It's so technical, but they don't call it social media for nothing. It involves people.
Yeah.
So, finding the person not only is technically capable, but has that feel as a professional communications person is a bonus, and that's what I would look for.
Yeah, I might add to that we really want to look for people who are good at expressing, good writers, good at expressing thoughts in relevant, timely, attention-getting ways, good visual, have good visual vision for what might catch people's attention on a crowded Facebook environment.
Well, and they need to have good judgment too, and discernment. It's kind of like, it's not like a salesman. You're selling, you're getting objections, you're getting kudos, you're getting objections, but you're trying to make a sale in a healthy way, and so that kind of orientation to be able to navigate that conversation is important.
Okay. How about this one? Well, you touched on that. How do I find reporters who are interested in our ministry niche?
Well, again, if we subscribe to Cision, so we can run a search and find out, whatever the beat is, whatever the kind of communications channel it is, wherever in the country it is, we can come up with a pretty good list of targeted journalists. Another way to do that is to do a search online for a topic, go to Google News, put in a topic, and find out who's writing about the things that you care about, that line up with who you are, especially national reporters. Some of them may be Christian media, most will probably end up being the secular media that covers either religion beat or a beat that's important to you. But find out who those writers are and get in touch, put them on your list and find a way to get your stuff to them. Also, track them in social media. You find out who they are, follow them, you get them to follow you, and you can pitch them through social media.
Okay. I think we might have time for a couple more questions. And here's one that's new. Have you watched the Netflix series Waco? And in reference to the Netflix series Waco, lots of mistakes were made on both sides.
You know, I only know, I haven't seen the Netflix series. I've got so many others I can't get to. But you know, I understand. I forget how old I was when that happened, but I understand David Koresh and what happened down at Waco. But I don't remember there was a big showdown. I know that between, I guess it was the National Guard or the police or something. But I honestly I can't speak to that specifically. I just know that.
I, th- I think we might have somebody on our team that would like to weigh in.
Yeah,
Um,
somebody I haven't seen it or even heard of it on Netflix.
I think it was Ty. Would you like to answer the question?
Yeah, Ty. I don't know. She's
Okay, maybe not.
muted.
Here's
Well,
another
sorry
one.
about that. I don't know the answer.
If we get it, we'll type it into the comments section. I've never seen Waco either, but I've seen a lot of other Netflix shows. Okay, here's another one. We've never contacted the media before, but we'd like to get our story out there. Where do we start?
You start by developing a media contact database. You need to find out at your newspaper or in your area newspapers, and you want to get the major daily and the community newspapers. You get usually there are 4 or 5 television news affiliates in your market. Get those contacts. Find the Christian radio stations that might have be interested in you with either newscasts or talk shows, magazines in your area. Develop that kind of list. If there's a Christian newspaper, a lot of towns have those, and websites. So you know, put together a media list, and then you know, think about what kind of stories you've got that might be of interest to them, that are really news, not just you think they're important, but important to the news media. And then float a press release with them. Distribute it. You get a good story with a good press release with a good media distribution list. Send it to them, and then follow up with pitch calls, and see what happens. So that's the way I go about it.
Good. Well, I think we're almost out of time. So is there anything else you'd like to say, Palmer?
No,
means of wrapping up.
I know this is out of gallop, and I apologize, but you know, the slides will be available. There's a downloadable resource on the website, and these are just sort of things I've learned over the years. If you had to have a pocket guide to media relations, this is a pretty good little you know, handbook to have around to sort of like, you know, PR for dummies. I mean, and I started off as one, and I learned a lot. But
Yeah.
that's what this is good for.
Good. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. Next week, we're planning to talk about a survey that ICC sent out to our database and to all of you through Crisis Connect a couple weeks ago to help us understand where you're all at in terms of what are your most immediate communications needs, and what are you seeing for the next 6 to 12 months? Because I think if we know that, we can sort of digest that together and really be in a better position together as a community and in our separate teams to put some actionable plans together as we start really coming out of this COVID crisis turmoil from a media and a marketing standpoint. So I hope you can all make that. If you haven't had a chance to take that survey, we would love to have you participate. So please do. The link will be in our, we can send it out in our replay email, and it's also on all of our landing pages. So I think that's about it.
Great.
So
Well,
thank
listen,
you all.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and you know, dive into the groups, and hopefully we'll see you on a webinar next week. So give us a call in the meantime if you need to talk about anything specific. Lord bless.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you all.